We're about to do an activity called Sink or Float. Let's get it going. All right, activity time. We're going to play a game called Sink or Float. Have you ever played Sink or Float before, Jacob?
Yeah.
You have? Okay, so we have 3 objects and we're going to see which items sink and which items float. Maybe they all sink, maybe they all float. We'll see. Okay, so we're going to put all of these in this cylinder of water that we filled up. So we're going to start with the lightest first. Jacob, this is a quarter. You think it's going to sink or float? It's the lightest. Think it's going to float? Okay, let's drop it in and see what happens.
It's sunk.
Sunk all the way to the bottom. So that's the lightest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now let's try the next one, the medium, which is the rock. You think it's going to sink or float?
Sink.
Sink. Last one sunk right to the bottom.
It sunk like
That actually sunk faster than the quarter, right? Weighs a little more. Now this is the heaviest, right? This is the orange. Sink or float?
Sink.
It's going to sink, right? Put it on in.
Oh, float.
It floats.
No.
I wonder why it floats. Well, there's a little bit of science behind this. So the orange has an outer covering, we'll call it armor, and it is skin that protects the orange. And the skin is actually very porous, which means there's pores within the skin which actually traps air, and that allows the orange to float. Just like how the orange has armor to protect it from drowning, you too, as a follower of Jesus, have armor to protect yourself from situations like this. And you can find it in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6. Verse 14 says, "Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God." Ephesians chapter 6 describes this as the armor of God. So in situations of fear, uncertainty, you can trust and put on the armor of God to protect yourself from drowning in fear. So we learned that the orange floats. Do you think it would be any different if there was no armor on the orange?
It would probably
Still float? Sink?
Sink or float.
We're gonna find out as we peel the orange. All right, the orange has been peeled and the outer covering is gone, no armor. Now we're gonna see how it reacts to the water. Sink or float?
Oh, yeah. It will
Sinks to the
sink.
bottom. And just like that, the orange sinks to the bottom because there's no outer covering, there's no armor to protect it. And that's what happens with us when we don't have armor, when we aren't protected, when we see fear, we begin to drown and we begin to sink. And so that's our experiment for today. That's our activity. And I hope you enjoyed it. And we learned something about armor, and we learned something about being... What are you doing?
Eating it.
Now we're going to eat it. Enjoy.